You're watching Cable 2.
Good evening. This is calling the Finance Committee to order. The board members are myself, Leah Crowley, Lyda Calvert-Hayes, Dana Cottle-Jones, and Alex Bohannon. We have 3 members here, so we do have a quorum and can go ahead. On discussion items, first we have custodial contract agreement, and Lauren Richards will be presenting.
Good evening, committee chair, board members, and Ms. McManus. So just to give you a brief overview, we currently have contracted custodial services in our building. We currently have 56 schools that are contracted, and we have extended the last contract 3 times since 2020, most of that due to COVID situations and trying to continue services through that time period. And so we are at a point where we needed to go out to bid for a new contract this year. And so in that new contract, we have done 45 schools and 12 of our district office buildings, which is all of our district office buildings. And this contract is a 1-year agreement with up to 4 annual 1-year renewals. And so just to give you an overview of the RFP process, we released the RFP in September of this year. We received those bids on October 17th. We did host a mandatory pre-bid meeting so that we could talk about our facilities and some of our expectations and take questions from those interested in submitting a bid. We had, we had 14 contractors come to that pre-bid meeting, which was a really great turnout. Once we received the bids on October 17th, we had 7 vendors submit proposals. In the committee review of those proposals, we elected to proceed with interviewing 4 of those 7 companies. And that committee was comprised of operations staff members, members of our finance team, principals, and assistant principals, so that we had a well-rounded committee. And so after taking interviews with those 4 vendors and asking some additional questions, we did, as a committee, elect 1 vendor to proceed with to have contract discussions and bring to you this evening. That vendor that we selected is called SSC Services for Education. And so many reasons why we selected this contractor over the others. They specialize in K-12 services, not just custodial services, they offer many other things, but they specialize in the educational industry. We felt that was very valuable to our schools. They offered competitive wages for their employees through their submittal process, which we were happy to see. They offered 5 zone managers to support the schools throughout the county so that there is good oversight on a daily basis to support the principals and the APs and their needs within the building and address those matters quickly. They provide industry standards for school cleaning. We call this APA Level 2. APA is an organization for leadership in educational facilities. And so Level 2 is what's classified as the appropriate cleaning level for school buildings. And there are various different levels for types of operations. And one of the other things that was really the standout item for this vendor was their MWBE program. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And so the budget for 22-23 school year for our current contract extensions was $7.4 million. We're just about 6 months through that. The new contract with SSC would be a January 2023 through December 2023 for a total of $9.2 million. And so for that 6-month period for the remainder of the fiscal year, you'd be looking at an additional $900,000 in the budget needed to move forward with this contract. And so just a little bit more on the MWB program. Again, this was a call out in our interviews with them, and we had a great deal of discussion about it. And they have a program called Grow Local. And so a lot of times when we have conversations with vendors and contractors, they do a lot of procurement with MWBE businesses for supplies, consumables, and equipment. But there is not often a partnership with another MWBE organization or company. And so Grow Local, SSC will actually partner and solicit work with a local MWBE company to bring them into our schools to do the cleaning work right alongside SSC. And so they take them in under their umbrella. If that organization is striving to get their MWBE certification, but maybe struggling with that process, because it is a very rigorous process with the state, they support them in getting that process completed. They front them the capital to support buying the equipment and the materials that are needed to support an account of our size, and they teach them and train them on many of the industry standards and custodial services. And so while those people are working in our schools, they are all working under that umbrella of SSC, but that organization's name is present and there in our schools. And this allows those MWBE business owners to be able to procure and compete in bids in our community that are a much larger value that they would have ever been able to complete before. And so with that, I will open it up to questions from our board members.
Yes, Ms. Kaplan.
A couple of things. When you're talking about the industry standard, level 2, what have we had before? I mean, did we have a certain standard? I'm just curious.
We did. So we've had a written scope of work for a number of years. We have adapted that. We adapted that through COVID. We've made adjustments to it with our contractors. Oftentimes, we have negotiated that scope of work to try to keep the cost of the contract down and to support our needs at the time. In this round of soliciting this business, we elected to go with building standards for K-12 schools, and we spent a great deal of time researching what that requirement was to request that scope and that level of work, because we're not seeing our buildings as clean as they need to be.
I think that's wonderful. Thank you. And my other question, in looking at the contract, can you talk a little bit about the equipment payments that it's $1,338,000, and it talks about 5-year and pay in, and then do we own it after 5 years? How does the client own it?
Sure. So we don't own it, but it's amortized over the 5 years for there to be set monthly payments. And so in doing that, part of the contract is they have to bring all that equipment in, correct? And so they bring that in, but they're bringing it in on the front end, and they're paying for it. And then we're paying for that equipment, we're paying for their employees, we're paying for those services over the life of the contract.
Okay. Thank you.
And Ms. Crowley?
Yes. So according to the contract, though, it does say that the district will own the equipment in 5 years. So are we then responsible for repairs and replacement of it?
Typically, we may become the owners of that equipment, but typically, we would work with them to repair it, and at that 5-year mark, we would renegotiate a new contract, or we would go with a new bid, and then we would negotiate those terms. So let's say at the end of 5 years, we own that equipment, and we put a new bid out, and we award to someone else. We would then have conversations about, well, we have the equipment, so then we wouldn't pay for that in the next round. And so there's changes in the contract language at that point.
Okay. When it said that we would have the title of that equipment, I just wanted to make sure that then there wouldn't be another expense for
There should not
repairing
be.
or replacing. Okay.
Yeah, there
and
should
then,
not be.
You said that 4 companies were interviewed.
Yes, ma'am.
So was SSC the only company to submit a bid?
No, so there were 7 companies that submitted a bid.
Okay.
And of the 7, we reviewed all 7 of those as a committee and elected that there were 4 that were a reasonable price. Price ranges ranged between $7 million and $12 million for all 7. And so we elected that based on competitive pricing and then training programs, managerial support, and other programs offered, MWBE being one of them. And so I believe in the board packet, it showed a sample of the rubric that we used to score all of the individuals. And so that's the criteria we used to select the 4 and then interviewed for additional information to allow them to elaborate.
Okay. And then my last question, there's a recruiting clause. So my question is, basically it's saying that if we terminate the contract, that the new company coming in can't recruit the previous workers. So will this firm recruit current staff from our other 2 firms that we're using?
They most likely will. They will
Okay.
advertise, and they will most likely solicit from the individuals that are currently working.
And Ms. Parker?
So, in the previous custodial contracts that we've had, did they supply the equipment, or do we own equipment already in all those schools?
They provided the equipment, and so they will take that equipment with them when they leave. There are also things like chemical machines for the products that they use. They will take those as well, and then new systems will be provided.
Okay, so there'll be no overlap of equipment or anything like that?
There should not be.
So we only own the equipment that are in the schools that we still manage, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And my question is, what would it cost for us to provide these services in-house with our own employees?
Sure. So if we were to go back in-house for all of the schools that we're contracting, I would say that the last estimate that we did was right around the time of COVID, and that was about $12.5 million. And through this process, we did speak to some other districts to look at their contracted models and their in-house models. And there is another district that has 53 schools in it that is in-house, and they are currently at about $12.5 million in their custodial budget.
And the thing that confuses me about why it would be so much more expensive is that somebody is obviously making money as a contractor. And is it because of retirement, or is it costs, or is it other benefit costs?
Yeah, it's a combination of things, and so you hit on a couple of the things that are the predominant ones. So benefits and retirement, those are things that contracted private companies can offer cheaper. Many of these companies are national organizations. Sometimes they employ part-time employees. We will have tons of full-time employees, but their benefits offerings are a cheaper cost to the company than those things are to us as a district. You also have workers' comp. In this industry, it is a higher, in child nutrition, custodial, those are high workers' comp areas. And so that is another area that there is savings as well.
And will the people they employ be getting full benefits if they're full-time?
Yes, that was one of the other things that they were asked to speak on in their interviews and to provide in their bids of what offerings there were to their employees. And so they outlined all that information for benefits to be provided. And that was a piece that we liked.
So the employees are employees, they're not
Correct.
contractors to the contractors?
That is correct.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Bohannon?
Thank you. So, Lauren, I had questions around the MWBEP. So in these conversations with the contractor, was there any conversation about them committing to a certain percentage of the contract to the MWBE subcontractor, or was it just we do this as a practice and we kind of have this partnership just in general?
So there wasn't a discussion on a specific percentage, but the information submitted in the bid states that they will engage with a company here locally for this Grow Local program in the first year of the contract. And then each month as we complete business, we will receive reports that let us know what portion of the staff and the payroll and those different financial portions went to that MWBE company.
Okay, and so this, I guess, the only comment I would have, and this is sort of less about this contract, because I think that it's, the fact that they've acknowledged that they're going to do this is a good thing. I would say so right now, my understanding is that we have MWB goals internally for construction projects, but not for goods and services. Am I correct? It's probably more of a...
I would probably defer that question to
To
Ms.
Tommy or
Jenkins or
somebody.
to Ms. Krantz.
That is true, but we're using both the construction percentages as our goal on all of those.
Okay, but the requirement is in the construction contracts. We don't have a requirement in contracts for goods and services. So I guess what I would say is that my hope is that we would ultimately move to a place where we kind of have that as well. Thank you.
And Ms. Parker?
So are they able to do that cheaper as well, or less costly, I guess, as well? Because, I mean, if they're a huge company, they can barter for things like equipment. I mean, they can get better prices on equipment, supplies, and things like that. Is that
Correct. Yes, they have national contracts for purchasing of equipment because of the quantity in which they purchase. And so they typically have very strong buying power, which are things that we can, as we move into this agreement, that we can certainly look at utilizing even for our in-house schools if we wanted to pursue support from that.
good? That was going to be my next question. And the other thing, are paper products that we use included in this as well, or are they providing those? Did I see that?
They are, so they will be providing those. So for the remainder of this school year, we will be keeping the consumables because we've already allocated those funds to the schools and we will use them up. And then beginning July 1, we will transition to the contractor providing those consumables. We did in the bids ask for 2 alternate prices, one with us keeping the consumables and one with them taking them. And based on logistics and storage and taking a workload off of requisitions for our lead secretaries, and even with the costing for that buying power, we felt like the best answer was to transition the consumables over to the contractor.
Okay, great, thank you.
And Ms. Woodbury?
Thank you. Good evening. And the question I have is about their alignment with our current personnel infrastructure. I think that it would be best on the front end if there is some consideration around, Mr. or Mrs. XYZ work, at this school or lead this group of our employees in the custodial, but because of a new system, now they're not. So I'm just trying to figure out how are we working with the current infrastructure of how our custodial staff is layered, if that makes any sense.
Sure. So currently, we have property managers that are aligned to each of our 5 area superintendents that oversee all of our property needs. And then we have a designated area lead specialist for custodial support that also works and is aligned with those area superintendents. And so our goal is for each of these 5 zone managers is to align them in that same structure, and their day-to-day point of contact will be the local area custodial specialist for specific matters in a school and addressing those concerns. And then our director, Yusuf Williams of Custodial Services, will oversee the contract day-to-day and be part of the meetings that we have with updates.
So we shouldn't expect any stressful displacements.
I do not anticipate that there will be stressful displacements. I will say that this transition is a complicated one. Anytime that you are making a transition of services of this magnitude, there are a lot of different moving pieces, and our goal is to make it as smooth of a transition as possible for everybody, and that there not be displacements.
And this will be up for action both at the committee level and full board tonight. And is that all the questions on this topic? Okay. So Ms. Richards will be talking to us about elementary perimeter fencing.
Great, thank you again. So as Kevin's transitioning the screen, our staff has recently been taking a look at our elementary campuses and reviewing their perimeter fencing and playground safety as it relates to our teachers being able to provide better supervision to our students. And so in the last month or so, Jonathan Wilson, the safety security team, and the facilities team have been taking a look, talking with principals, and looking at the structures out there. We do have a large number of playgrounds or play areas that are fenced in, but we do have a large number that's not, or campuses that are lacking perimeter fencing in general. And so as we started digging through that information and trying to be mindful of funds as well, we started with identifying 6 schools that have a EC programming that we felt needed the most support right now to be able to have areas where those children can play safely and the teachers feel comfortable with their supervision. And so we've spoken to each of the 6 principals at the schools listed here and talked through that plan with them for them to feel comfortable. A number of different things were taken into account as we looked at putting the fencing in place. Depending on how small you make the space, there's panic hardware that's necessary. Other places you need pedestrian gates. We didn't want to impede traffic. We talked about that at a recent school as well. And also thinking operationally for mowing certain areas with the size mowers we have, weed eating, things of that nature. And so for those 6 schools, we have determined an estimate of $175,000 needed to complete this square footage of fencing that we have mapped out. And so if the board approves the $175,000 limit from fund balance, we will proceed with soliciting bids to go with the lowest provider to get that installed. Any questions?
Yes, Ms. Crowley.
Yes, how were these 6 schools selected?
These 6 schools were selected for their EC programming, classes that they have, mainly MAP classes in their building where students are in those self-contained environments.
And these are the only 6 schools that have that situation right now.
These are the 6 schools that have the highest priority that don't have play areas that are already fenced. So
Okay.
Walkertown, for example, has those classrooms, but those students actually already play in a playground that is fenced in.
Okay, and then how many more schools don't have perimeter fencing in play areas for elementary?
I honestly do not have that number for you this evening. So we started with the high priority schools and are working on finishing that assessment. Some schools, it makes more sense to do an entire perimeter versus a smaller play area, and we're still working through determining that.
Okay, thank you.
So I hope that that will come back together as we get the final results for the facility audit to kind of look at it holistically.
Ms. Parker?
What kind of fencing will this be? Will it be chain link or the new?
It's going to have barbed wire. No, I'm just kidding. I really hope not. No, we wouldn't do that. It'll most likely be chain link fence throughout the area. We've done some black fence in different
Yeah.
areas as well. And so if there's already something on campus, we may try to match it.
Okay, so I was just wondering whether it would be the pickets or the other, so, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you know if the fencing issues will be part of the facilities review that will get presented to the next board?
I don't know that we cited that. Darryl, you may want to speak on that. I don't think we cited that specifically in the audit, but I think as our teams go out and take a look at the maps, that it's something that we can marry together with that facility audit to say what would make sense, and even expand that to our secondary schools if we want to look at that. We've done a brief estimate for elementary schools. Is it elementary? Is that right? If you were to do perimeter fencing around every elementary school today, you're looking at about $2 to $2.5 million minimum.
Okay. Any other questions? And this, again, will be on for action, both the committee and full board. And so, thank you, Ms.
Great,
Richards.
thank you.
And now we have Mr. Tommy Kranz talking to us about the retention bonus.
Good evening. I need to clarify, because on the fencing, I know we're going to want to move quickly. In order to do so, we cannot use fund balance. That would take 60 days for approval. So I'll go to a different funding source, which is fine if funds are available. It just will not be.
But is it a funding source that is available?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And I have no problem with that. It's just
Okay.
to make sure.
Okay.
So as you're aware, we continue to monitor ESSER. ESSER 1 closed out here in September. ESSER 2 will close out in the upcoming September, and then ESSER 3 will close out the following. As we do that, we continue to look at those funds. We're all done off of projections, see what's available. With the understanding, our major goal is staffing, is making sure that we continue to keep the staffs we have, that we're able to remain competitive and can find additional staff. And in doing so, that's been one of the missions that Ms. McManus has given to us on the financial side, is ensuring the dollars are being best used to generate the best return on the investments that are being made. In doing that, we've come up with $1,500, a bonus plan that would be $1,500 per person paid out in 2 installments. This would be based on 8,000 employees. As of September 30th, we had 7,543 people getting a paycheck. The amount that would be received that you'll see is before taxes. Because it'll be in a separate check, outside of their paycheck, it'll be taxed at the 22%, which is IRS statutory requirements. And then you'll have the state income tax as well. All staff and retirees, meaning those who are working. So if I'm off, well, that isn't, but it's funny, but it's not with the phone calls we'll get. So if I'm, out for whatever reason, you have to be in the building, you have to be in the classrooms, you have to be doing work for the students, and everybody does, don't get me wrong. But there is a point we have to cut it off at some point in time, and that's our cutoff. The first installment to get, you would have to be employed as of December 5th. The second installment will be January 13th, which is the payment date. The $500 will be paid on or before December 16th. The second one will be paid on or before January 13th, and that's $1,000. Total is $12 million. I have received approval from the state, so we're ready to go if you vote on it tonight.
Any questions?
I just think this is wonderful, and, all that we can do for our employees is good. I'm just looking in the future. With the amount of ESSER dollars that we have, do you think that we could maybe talk about this another time down the road? More bonuses?
I think that, I'm just going to be careful how I word this thing. I think there'll be dollars that'll free up within ESSER 2 and ESSER 3.
Okay,
I think the challenge will be for you as a board and for the superintendent is what's the best use of those dollars as we move forward into FY '25 and beyond. There's a lot of challenges, a lot of things will change because ESSER and the rules provided districts with a lot of freedom that they've never had before.
right.
And so how do you best manage those dollars with the needs of the school system are? Because they grow every year, and they're going to continue to grow. So that was the intent.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank
Ms.
you.
McManus.
Yeah, I was going to chime in too, that the, in a meeting I had with the large districts, all of them were coming forward with another ESSER bonus and actually have planned to do bonuses for 2 years of ESSER. When we started the bonuses last year, I was not predicting this, but I think with staffing, with the challenges continuing, that we are continuing to face, I think this is a good way to go. It is not after ESSER. This will not be an option after ESSER. I'm not sure how we could free up dollars for that. So really, we're talking about right now to address current needs and to honestly to show our employees we value them and we need to keep them for the rest of the school year.
Right.
So, and beyond, but especially the rest of the school
Yeah.
year.
Ms. Jones?
So, first question, so are we splitting it up because of tax rate? I was wondering, like we have 1,000 coming in January, but I know, the holidays are coming
Uh-huh.
up, and so I was wondering why we
There is a
wouldn't do
good
it
reason.
all, or?
There's a
right.
good reason.
Okay.
So the holiday, so we are also going to, and Tommy, I don't think has announced this yet, but.
Let's
pay-
announce it.
Let's announce it.
Let's announce it.
Pay our employees before Christmas. So their pay would be the 30th or 31st. We're going to do it on the 22nd. By the time they get to January, they're going to want something sooner than
That-
January 30th or 31st.
That makes sense.
So we decided, let's give a little bit before the holidays, and then let's give more at that point when you've done all your holiday spending, and now you're waiting for that paycheck. So, yeah.
And you're sure to come back after the holidays
Yes, ma'am.
as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Ms. Parker?
Can I just ask a question before you, I know I'm not on this committee, but before you go into action items, do we need to put the correct funding source if it's not coming out of fund balance? Do we need to amend that?
Just don't, if you don't vote on it, you couldn't take it out of fund balance. Just don't vote on it, on the fund balance component. Funding, let me say this, the funding is there to address the request. As the chief financial officer, I have to do a pre-audit, so you're getting a verbal pre-audit tonight.
Yeah.
The dollars are there, it just won't be out of fund balance.
Right. It doesn't say on the action item, either in the committee or
Okay,
in the
good.
full board, where the funding's
Exactly.
coming from. It just
Exactly.
says
That would have to be
approving
a
it.
separate line item.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure I didn't want us to get in trouble later with,
You will not.
okay, good, thank you.
Right. So that moves us on to action items. And number one is consider custodial contract agreement for full board approval. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor? And that's unanimous of those present. Consider purchase and installation of site perimeter fencing for full board approval
Move
tonight.
to approve.
Second.
And any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Consider retention bonus for full board approval tonight. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? That also is unanimous, so announcements are that the next time the Finance Committee meets, it will be with a new board, and it's been a pleasure serving. And now on to Policy Committee.
Good evening, everyone. I will call to order the Policy Committee. As a reminder, the members of that committee are myself, Board Member Caudill Jones, Board Member Woodbury, Board Member Motzinger, and Board Member Crowley. We have 3 discussion items this evening. The first is updates to policy 5131.01, use of metal detectors, guidelines for implementation with Jonathan Wilson.
Oh, no, no, Jonathan's going to do it. Good evening, Mr. Bohannon, members of the committee and the board, and the Superintendent McManus. I'm just going to be here for a split second to introduce Jonathan Wilson, who's going to provide an overview of the changes that are being recommended for the policy. But this is, like the other policies that we brought to you, in alignment with updating our discipline-related policies or anything related to discipline to align with the code. And as you all know, we received grant funding to put new metal detectors in our buildings. And so we use this as a really good time to update our policy and remove any out-of-date language in the policy. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan.
Good afternoon. So I know you guys have had an opportunity to look at the previous 5131.01. And we, as a group, safety and security team, legal team, looked at the policy and felt like that it actually was pretty good policy with very few changes need to be made besides just clearing up some old language, taking out some school names and things like that. So the section, number one, the introduction, there was no changes made. In section 2, there was no changes made. And those were the circumstances in which a metal detector could be used to screen students. And one was to search a particular student, and B, when school officials had a reasonable belief that a weapon could possibly be on campus under 4 different circumstances. The first section that was changed was under C, alternative schools. We really only have one alternative school, which is Main Street, that uses metal detectors on a daily basis. I think they screen folks that come in the back door, and I think now at the front door as well, right? And so it was just needed to add in the code of character, conduct, and support, and take out schools that I don't even know when they existed. I don't know what the Millennial Academy even was, and I've been here my entire life. So those were moved. In section 3, which is circumstances when metal detectors may be used to screen students and public who attend after-school activities, and that was specifically when we brought these metal detectors in, was to deal with athletic events. But it was also large events where we've had folks coming on campus that we didn't know who they were necessarily, and athletic events across the country are becoming more scary times for folks that do what I do. And so basically we took out the specific term football game and added in athletic events, and then changed and added in the section for protection and the welfare of people attending the event. Section 4, we took out the term pat down. That didn't sound really good to be patting folks down in the school setting, and just changed it to search of a student. And then there was several times that the term airport type metal detector was used, and I'm not really sure what that means, but we chose to change the terminology to walk through metal detector. And so I think that overall, that was the bulk of the changes to the policy. There was actually more language taken out than was added in. I'll take any questions that you may have.
Board Member Crowley.
Thank you. Is there a place in this policy to reexamine the clear bag policy if we're using metal detectors?
So clear bags were not mentioned within this. I don't think clear bags are mentioned anywhere in any of our policies. I will say that the clear bag policy was a complement to the walk-through metal detectors. So if you've gone to a football game, it does slow things down when you walk through a metal detector. Mm-hmm. It really slows things down when you actually implement it and use it in a school environment. So the clear bag policy, even we don't have it on a school day, but we did put it in athletic events to make it go faster, because a bag doesn't go through the metal detector, it goes around the metal detector. And so if I was walking through the metal detector, I passed my bag around, Brent would look at it, look through the clear bag, move it on. And so the reason we did that is because almost every sporting event you go to in the country, whether you went to see the Panthers play, I don't know why anybody would right now, but whether you went to see the Panthers play, why you saw the Panthers play, or whether you went to an Appalachian or Wake Forest football game, everybody has clear bag policy. So to answer your question, it's not addressed. I don't know if that's something that could be addressed at some point, but it was not an additional. It was just, we don't know what's on someone's person versus what's in someone's bag, It was just easier. I will say that Greensboro, Guilford County Schools, Lexington City Schools, a lot of school districts around are implementing the same clear bag policy that we just implemented. So I don't know. if we
I've
wanna
just
go
seen a
different
lot of
direction.
frustrated grandmothers have to walk pretty far back to their cars
Right.
in inclement weather, you know, uphill both ways kind of thing.
Right.
It's,
I think maybe we should do, not to interrupt, I think maybe
Yeah.
we should do a better job as far as advertising. Now, we do have the sandwich boards in front of the events as you come up, but,
right.
you know, maybe
By that
that's.
time, you've
You're already
already
there.
walked a half a
Yeah.
mile from your car, right?
And just for clarification, so Board Member Crowley, I believe that the clear bags, that was something that was done, that wasn't a board policy, that was done internally. I think that was something that the district decided to do, Jonathan, is that correct?
It was. And it was also because we were implementing our metal detecting policy or reinforcing our use of metal detectors in events. We hadn't got our walkthrough at that time. We were using wands. And so it was a way to expedite the process because we didn't want to slow folks down. They were trying to get to a football game. I will tell you, the one time that we saw the biggest bog down or slowdown of traffic was to go to the Glenn graduation because we searched with a wand at that time. Actually, we had metal detectors at that time. But I don't think we enforced the clear bag policy on that occasion because that wasn't people that were coming. It was a lot of grandmothers and folks that were coming. So we were not strict on clear bag policy on that occasion. But football games, after you go to the first one, typically you have at least seen it before, so.
Right. But even for the airport, you don't have to have a clear bag. So
But what
to
you,
me, we're doing double of what, and it is taking longer. I've heard from several parents who went to football games. They got there at 6:45 and didn't get in a seat until 8:15
Right.
because of waiting to get through security and everything,
so if I would say that we will get better at that over time.
Yeah.
We've gotten faster each time, but I would say that if we do away with the clear bag policy, then it would be even more slower because then we're gonna have to look through every bag. 'Cause I can't trust what's in a bag. At this time, at this day and age, there's an article I would encourage you to read. It's on ESPN, put it out, and it's the rise in violence in sporting events across the country. And so it's a scary time on a sporting event when you have heightened sense of emotion and people that you honestly don't know who they are. But I
Yeah.
understand your concern.
So, yeah, I was one of those grandmothers that walked back to the car too with my bag. And it was a certain size. So they said it had to be a certain size, your bag does?
So if John Sullivan wants to, he's probably memorized the clear bag policy quicker than I do, but there
I
is a
mean,
clear.
not even a clear bag, just
It's
it
a
had to be a
clear
certain
bag
size.
policy or
Yeah.
a clutch or a smaller type bag.
A small bag, okay.
Yeah.
Or clear, okay.
So you couldn't put a large item in a clutch purse or something smaller like that.
something like that, that
We
would
also clarified that if someone has a diaper bag, that, you
Right.
know, just take the purse aside, ask them if you can look in it and allow that bag to go in. So we've made some concessions, and I've also told the ADs if the grandmother does come up, that it's okay to pull her to the side, ask her if you can review the bag instead of making them walk all the way
Right.
back.
That's what I would
I will
hope for.
reinforce
Yes.
that with them.
Yeah. I mean, we had cheerleaders turned away with their backpacks. That's gone to the
So that's
extreme.
training on our part, because what
Yeah.
we did say was
Yes.
we want students to be involved in extracurricular activities. So if they're in school, where they've been staying after school to do their homework, and then they're gonna come and watch the athletic event, we don't wanna turn them away. If they wanna sit in the stands and read and do their studies, that's fine. But we have to use some common sense and say, okay, yes, ma'am, we will do more training and tighten that up.
Any additional questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is updates to policy 5127, graduation requirements, and update and AR 5127, graduation requirements. I see Dr. Wilson.
Good evening, sorry. We are here to present about the recommended changes for the policy 5127 graduation requirements. The reason for these changes are to align with our state graduation requirements and also to give a voice to our students towards their trajectory, towards their post-secondary interest. So the first item you will see that was changed was occupational prep was changed to the course of study that will align with our state guidelines with DPI. Science has been changed, or the recommended change would be from 4, which is our current graduation requirements, including our local graduation requirement, to 3, which is our state requirement. Health and physical education has been changed, PE/health education has been changed to health and physical education because of the fact that that's what our state calls it. We removed the local PE requirement, and we added education to career and technical education because of our state. Occupational prep was stripped out, and it was changed to employment preparation to align with our state name for that. Electives were changed from 4 to 6. CPR was added as well because that is a graduation requirement for all of our students. Arts education is a new graduation requirement that was added. Starting with this class that are in 6th grade, they will have to take 1 course of arts education by the time they graduate, so that was added as well. We removed Section 2 exception to graduation requirements because that is exceptions, which would be a local graduation requirement. And in Section 3, which is now changed to 2, we took out the waived by principal because that is a local graduation requirement. Under diplomas and certificates awarded, we took out a North Carolina Academic Scholars Diploma because there is no North Carolina Academic Scholars Diploma. It's an endorsement, and so we took that piece out. We also updated the occupational course of study hours. It was 360, it's 225 hours of competitive employment for graduation. Graduation certificate, we added following the extended content standards for those students. They are not OCS. And then we also added within that the courses that they will have to complete in order to receive a certificate under their policy. And that goes down. We took away 360 because it's 225, again, as stated earlier. And that is all for our grad policy. Any questions?
Board Member Parker.
Where will they take CPR? In which class?
PE is usually when they take it in middle school, actually.
So they will get that requirement in middle school, but it'll
Yes.
just transfer over into their, well, okay, what happens to a child who transfers in, who, doesn't have CPR from wherever they came?
Right. The schools devise a plan to support the students who do not receive that in 8th grade during their matriculation between 9th and 12th grade.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And I really do hate to see that other PE go. I'm sorry. I think our children need to be moving, but I know that that's not.
They can still take it,
They can
right?
still take
Yeah,
it.
they can
Yes,
still
they can
take
still
it, but
take it.
I suppose, well, I guess that helps our dance situation that we had a little bit. But, so I just hope that we'll have lots of opportunities for children to do something that is active and something for males as well, I think. And I know lots of males take dance, and that's a good thing. I just want to make sure we give them lots of opportunities for movement, because I definitely think that physical activity is very important.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And we do have team sports classes and physical education. We have lifetime activities courses. We have weightlifting courses. So there are other choices that they can make.
Let's move on to our unless there are any more questions.
Really quickly. So, so I see foreign language as sort of, we're removing foreign language, correct? Go ahead, sorry.
Yes, because that is not a graduation requirement.
Right, but some institutions, so if you, and I know that this is just our requirement to graduate, but some institutions, if you want to apply to go to college, require foreign language.
Right.
So if a student is not aware, where will a student be kind of told or informed that if their desire is to go to college, then they will have to take that foreign language?
well, during that advisement with their counselor. So during registration, and it's also in the registration handbook.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. AR 5127, we changed the deviation from these regulations requires the approval of chief academic officer to superintendent or the superintendent's designee. I didn't do a lot of changes in this one. In section D, we took away the PE life management skills because that is a local requirement. In English, we took away the 9th grade students who did achieve a level 2, 3, or 4 on the 8th grade end of test are required to enroll in essentials of English in addition to English. That can be a choice and not a requirement to support those students who may need those foundational courses. We took away the C for the earn a final course grade of C to D or above, so that they will still get that credit even if since they passed the course. And then the same thing with Math 2 by receiving a final grade of C, we changed that to D, or recommended changes to D. Science, we took away the one additional course, science course, because that's a local requirement. And then moving forward. The social studies graduation requirement for students on the occupational course of study who will graduate in 2025 and beyond have not been determined as of February 2021. We took that away because it has been. We changed again the name Health and Physical Education to align with our state guidelines, and then they will only have 1 credit is required by the state. We took away the career and technical education classes and included it in with the electives further down at the bottom, and then we took away the life management skills because that's no longer, that's a local requirement, sorry. And then the employment preparation to align with our state guidelines was taken away. Occupational preparation was taken away to replace with employment preparation. And then the world language component of C or above in 8th grade will receive 1 level. World language high school credit was taken away as well. Electives, 6 credit elective courses were added instead of 4. 2 of the 6 electives must be any combination from either career and technical education, arts education, or world languages. And then 4 electives may come from any other subject area or cross-disciplinary courses. And then, of course, as I was stating earlier about the CTE courses, the recommendation is that students take a 2 or 3 career and technical education course sequence in a focused career pathway program or study. So we want to make sure that our students have a career pathway just in case to support their post-secondary endeavors. And then we added the arts education graduation policy that I spoke of in the actual policy. The law directed the State Board of Education to modify graduation requirements, which previously included an option to include an arts education credit to require 1 credit of arts education to be completed at any time during grades 6 through 12. The new requirement begins with students entering grade 6 in 22, 23, and subsequently in grade 9 in 25-26 school year. And that is all. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
Thank you.
All right, our last discussion item is AR 5124, proposed revisions with Andrew Kraft.
Thank you, Chair Bohannon, members of the board. These are not policy changes. These are simple recommendations for revisions to the AR, and there are 3 of them. Thanks, Kevin. Here they are: to eliminate references to North Carolina final exams, to end their use of EOG's scores as a grade and end the requirement of students requiring them to take the EOC in an EOC course. Let me explain those to you. First of all, we no longer administer NC final exams, so it would make sense to remove that language. Frankly, it should have been done years ago. Secondly, we have had a practice here which is really unique to our district, and we're recommending that we end this, kind of catch up with the rest of the state. What we do is we use students' EOG score, convert it to a 100-point scale, and then we use it in their overall grade if it doesn't harm their overall grade. We're recommending we end that. As I say, we're the only district I could find that engages in this practice. And then finally, we also have an AR that says a student has to take the EOC in order to get credit in the course. Again, this is unique to us. We don't feel like it's a student-centered approach, right? And so a child takes the course, passes the course, and for whatever reason doesn't take the EOC, we don't believe that they should have to go back and retake the entire course, assuming they had. Now, that will be at 20% of their grade. That's state requirements, so that if they don't take the test, that 0 will still count as 20% of the grade. We can't change that. What we are changing is this piece of the AR that says you had to have taken the EOC in order to get credit for the course. So we're recommending these 3 changes. Again, it's kind of catching us up with the rest of the state. And we've checked with the schools and the teachers, and they're behind this. So those are our recommendations. Questions?
So what happens, I mean, this is not really pertaining to this, but what happens when a child doesn't take, they have to take the required EOCs, correct? The ones that we have an accountability model for, correct?
Absolutely. Students
Okay.
have to take the EOGs, they have to take the EOCs, yes.
Okay.
The question is, if a
Okay.
child doesn't, for whatever reason, can they still get the credit in the course? And the answer is, we believe the answer should be yes. So if a child's absent the entire week of testing, right, and doesn't take the EOC, should they still be able to get credit in the course? We believe the answer to that should be yes.
Okay. What happens to our,
Accountability?
our numbers with accountability?
Yeah,
Does it
great
count as a
question.
zero? Or,
Yeah.
I mean, how does
it
that
get
affect
factored in?
us?
It's a great question. So a school is expected to test 95% of their students. If they test below that 95% threshold, essentially those scores are counted as not proficient scores, right? So if you test 97%, no impact on you. But if you test less than 95%, it's that difference between whatever you tested 95%, those are counted essentially as not proficient scores. They're included in the denominator. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it hurts the school if they don't reach their participation 95%.
Yes, Board Member Crowley.
Thank you. Why would we eliminate the use of an EOG score if it can only raise a student score? Because there's plenty of kids out there who have who don't do well Monday through Friday in the school day.
Yeah.
But they somehow knock it out of the park when it comes to the EOG. And that could be considered a true reflection of proficiency. So why would we not? I love the idea that you can take it and have it not hurt your score, but why would we not let it help their grade?
Yeah, so the feedback we got on that particularly came from elementary. When you had students who had an A, right, essentially their score can't be helped. It's impossible to help their score, right? But some of those other students, and they felt like this is weighing in too much. The teachers were telling us this. This is weighing in too much, and it really shouldn't. We feel like that shouldn't really impact the score that we believe is a more accurate reflection, all the work that they did over the course of the year. And that's the feedback that we got from teachers.
I just know too many students who don't engage, and then they know all the material and they get a 97% on the EOG. And that's a true reflection of what they really know, even though they might not have that engagement Monday through Friday in the classroom.
I think, you know what, I think then that's probably what we need to address then. We need to make sure they have the engagement and that we make learning engaging so that they want to be there, they want to produce the work that, I mean, that's, you know.
I mean, I see this
that's what leads-
with AG and HAG kids a lot.
Well, but
where
what
they
we
do not do any of the work. They have an F in the class and then they get 99 on the test
because they
Yeah.
know all the.
They're going to
Yeah.
struggle in college. They need to be producing as they go along. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but they're not going to just take one test in college and, you know what I'm saying? They've got to be prepared. You've got writing assignments, you do them, we got to make sure we engage them. Go to the root cause of why they might not be engaged and engage them. Do a better job there.
So, Mr. Kraft, so is that the comments that you said you received in elementary around the kind of the EOG score weighing in too much, is that you think grounded in sort of this notion that the test is not an accurate kind of parameter of like student performance, or kind of what's at the root of that, do you think?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think that the teachers, and it's funny because particularly it's been these HAG and AG teachers who have given us this feedback, say, we believe that grade is an accurate reflection. This is what happened over the course of the entire year. And we feel like this is an unfair bump, right? So if I have a kid who has an A, really their EOG isn't going to impact them. But this child who had a B or C, right, and now they're getting this bump, the teacher said to us they felt like that was unfair.
Okay.
But to me,
Board
it's
member
really about the mastery, and there's a lot of kids who are disengaged because they already know what's being taught in that classroom, and they completely disconnect. And they don't do the assignments, and you hear them. They're like, I already know all this stuff. Why do I need to write this paper? Why do I need to do this? And I agree with you, Ms. McManus, about the engagement thing, but it's also about that, that individualized instruction that we know we're not there yet, and we can't expect, I don't think we're there yet. Having an individualized plan for every kid every day and assessing them on every subject. And some kids truly can. I mean, it's just the way they process information. They can hear it, or they read it on their own, or they're doing it, and then they get a great EOG score. And I just think we need to look at, we have different types of learners, and not all of them are going to be little compliance officers who sit and check every box to get their A all along. So.
Yeah, I know. I know what you're saying. I don't see if work is engaging, which is what we have to be doing, is addressing the assignments, it should not be compliance. Classwork should not equal compliance and checking boxes. It should be meaningful work that actually, think about when we did that social studies activity. If you just don't do it, that's meaningful work that leads to more learning. More learning is not just like I can regurgitate information. I mean, there's a learning process. We really need to engage our kids better, and we need to do a better job making sure the assignments are meaningful for them so that they are engaged. I understand what you're saying, though. I don't want to do anything that hurts kids, only help them.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
The grade should represent whether or not they've achieved mastery. That's what a grade is based on. It's not grade based on your attendance or how hard it's based on whether or not you demonstrate mastery. And the EOG should be doing the same thing. So.
Board Member Woodbury, did you have a question or comment? I thought I saw your hand.
I did, but I thought about the relevancy maybe for this conversation, but I am interested, Mr. Kraft, around if there's any idea of how the state is going to adjust accountability, because I'm hearing that there will be some adjustments to the accountability model for our state.
You're right. There's been a lot of discussion about changes to the accountability model. Increasing the percentage growth counts in the overall school performance grade is one major change. These through grade assessments, and so not just a summative EOG or EOC, but formative assessments, really replacing that end of grade test. So all of these are being discussed right now. I'm really curious to see what the final decisions are.
Board Member Parker.
So, elementary grades, I mean, they're not on a transcript.
Right,
They
right.
don't follow anybody anywhere.
Right.
They don't go, they don't go on your permanent record. I
Right.
mean, I know that it's nice for households to see those report cards come home. But I guess as a former elementary school teacher, there's a certain part of me that children, that they need to see if they're not completing work or if they're not engaging, that it's difficult to give a grade for something that's not happening.
Yeah.
And so, and the same is true with life. I mean, if you're not,
Yeah.
you know, if you're not doing all of your job,
Yeah.
then there's some, you know, there's some repercussions for that. So I guess, I mean, I understand, and I had one of those children that did that. And he made a D in health, and I just about lost it. But anyway, because he read a book during health. But you know, there's a certain part, I don't know, that's a catch-22, I think. And I think I would be a lot more concerned about it if it was an EOC.
Yeah.
But an EOG,
Yeah.
that it's not going to follow them anywhere except
Right.
that their mother still, when the child's 40, remembers that he made a D in health. You know, that's the bad part of that. But you know, I don't have real heartburn, I guess, over that. Just, that's my two.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Thank you, Mr. Kraft. We will now move to our action items. The first is consider approval to post policy 5131.01 for public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you. It's been motioned and properly seconded. Is there any question or discussion? All those in favor? All right, that passes. Our next action item is consider approval to post policy 5127 for public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any question or discussion? All those in favor? All right, that passes. And our announcements is that this is the last policy committee of this term. Thank you all so much that have served on the policy committee. And with that, I will adjourn the committee and turn it over to our chair.
I would like to call the meeting to order. May I have a motion to go into closed session to discuss a personnel matter?
So move.
Second. Second? There was a second. Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you. That's unanimous.
So.
Thank you for joining us on Your School Channel, K2.